Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hello and welcome to Unclassified Woman. Today I'm speaking to Riikka Rajamaki. Riikka helps women unlock their creative and intuitive abilities after an abortion or miscarriage. She teaches women how to move from fear to love, no matter the circumstances. One of her life mottos is, "It's better to nourish the seed than cry over the lost fruit." Riikka is the creator of WombQuest, a certified spirit coach, a wellness coach, gifted body worker, trained intuitive, and holds a master's degree in sociology. Based in San Francisco now, Riikka travelled across the world from her homeland of Finland, seeking someone to take her pain away. She spent thousands of dollars on her college education, healers, workshops, fortune tellers, and plane tickets. It took her years to realise that she was looking for that someone in all the wrong places. She learned that the greatest journey is the one we take inside ourselves. She started questioning her concepts about a happy life and realised that her happiness wasn't dependent on her worldly creations but on her personal growth and her ability to remain centred and connected to spirit. As Riikka started peeling away layers that were her false self, she became lighter and freer to be who she truly is. And from this place of inner integrity, her life simply started unfolding in front of her with ease and grace. And she was finally able to start discovering the gifts that she came here to give. This was a really interesting conversation about Riikka's experience with a conscious abortion. She didn't have a physical operation. It was actually a very spiritual experience and life-changing for her. But anyway, so I hope you enjoy this very personal account that she shares with us. And so today I'm delighted to be talking to Riikka Rajamaki, and she will be sharing her very powerful story of her conscious abortion experience, which is just fascinating and so powerful to listen to. And so, as you know, the purpose of the podcast, Unclassified Woman, is about reminding us that every woman's life is equally valid and meaningful. Whether she's a biological mother or not, it's part story sharing, part myth busting, and these interviews are really highlighting women all over the world who create their own definition of purpose and meaning beyond having children, regardless of their reasoning or their circumstances. So, Riikka, welcome.
Thank you so much.
And I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. I know that the listeners are going to find this, so insightful and helpful. And I first connected with you by reading your powerful blog post about your conscious abortion experience. And I just resonated with it so much. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your story today, and then we can get into our conversation?
Sure, yes, I would happy to. It was 2009, about 6 years ago. I was 36 years old. I had gotten married a year before that. I got pregnant with this wonderful man who told me from the very beginning that his life path does not include children. And I remember him proposing me one beautiful spring morning under a waterfall, and I remember answering yes. And in the background, I remember also hearing another voice that asked me, "But what about children?" And I kind of conveniently put that aside. I realized that my school of love and learning about love and all the beliefs that I have attached to it has just started, because I realize now that I got married to this man knowing that some of his goals and his purpose, this life, wasn't exactly aligned with mine. And so when I became pregnant 2009, it obviously was a huge reality check. It was really a big moment when I did that test in my bathroom and he was home, and it was a shock. And I'm sure whoever has gone through that moment knows what comes up. A very eclectic collection of all the human emotions are present, and so that was kind of the beginning scene for that huge game changer, huge staring at my own fears eye to eye and expanding from that place into an entire new way of being.
Wow. And so in that moment, Riikka, did you know very clearly, did you feel that you had to make a choice between your husband or whether or not you wanted to embark on this experience of having a child, or was it just clear to you what you wanted, or did you feel torn? Was there anything that was uppermost completely clear to you?
There was a very clear knowing from the very first second that there is another way than the traditional, the two options, which is to have a child or have a portion. And that knowingness gave me such strength. And I didn't at that moment know yet what that was, but I did feel slight pressure, knowing that I can't keep this child. And I also knew that I am not strong enough. My constitution just is not strong enough for abortion. I mean, I have absolutely nothing against abortion that is done in a clinical way. I just knew that just the idea kind of made me really weak. And so what I then usually do, I get on my knees and I start praying. And I did. And I was invited to this meditation the following day that my girlfriend generously offered just to assist both of us. And she guided us through this meditation where I actually was able to meet this baby spirit. I sat with her. It was probably an entire hour. It was all done in silence and on our own. I had my own journey and he had his own journey. But I remember this baby spirit energy of light walking towards me, holding somebody's hand, and I'm assuming that was the baby's guide or angel. So she's walking towards me, and I have never seen anything as beautiful. I was absolutely at awe in this moment of actually meeting my child, and or not my child, but this energy that was kind of curious about, what is going on here, So I started asking her questions, and I asked, why did she come? And she said very clearly, I am not here to bring confusion. I am here to bring clarity, because it does not look like you and your beloved know exactly what you're creating together.
Wow.
And then I asked her, would she be okay if she didn't come through right now? Would she be willing to leave on her own? And she looked at me and she said, yes, I will leave within 3 days, but I might need some help.
Wow.
That's all she said. And then she walked away.
And so, gosh, so obviously it sounds like that was such a crystal clear experience of connection with that amazing soul. And what were some of the beliefs that situation brought up for you to explore? Did it strengthen your belief in those spiritual realms? Did it bring up more questions? Like, how did you feel after having that experience?
In that moment, I probably wasn't questioning anything. There was really no room for doubt, because it was that's what it was. It was such a clear, guided moment. I wasn't in fear. I was like, okay, this is the information. It was like actually getting information from a person in a body. That's how real it was. And but of course, this moment in general brings up a lot of stuff, a lot of questioning my own power, my own ability to change situations, my kind of a habit to fall into the victimhood and circumstances, and forgetting that we are connected, we are constantly merged with source, we are constantly being guided. So there was all this like reinforcement to the knowing that I already had known since I was very little, but at the same time, it was the first time I had that experience. So it became very real. You know, it's different from reading about stories. And the reason, one of the main reasons I'm really passionate about sharing my story is that everyone can look at their own lives and see where are those highlights and situations where we had a moment of choice of believing in life and in ourselves in a new way, and some people may call it a miracle. Like, what are those things that are actually miraculous about our lives, and what are those challenges that actually take us to that point of having no choice but to consider a miracle?
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that often the definition of a miracle is really just a shift in perception.
It really is. And it's really what it also is, ability to be 100% in the moment, in the present, because miracles don't happen in the future. They don't happen in the past. And that's where our mind usually lives. So the ability to really live with the miracles day to day is really knowing how to go beyond your mind and understand that we are a spirit and we are guided and we are connected to the larger part of us that already knows why we're here, while we forget and get confused.
Yeah, and really highlights that we create everything in the moment as well, don't we? We create our experience by being very present in that moment.
Yes, and also sometimes it really makes me think, yes, we do choose, but we also chosen, we also chosen to feel these moments of awe, so that we can remember and be part of the family that is bringing this new awareness. And maybe in the theme of your podcast, it's like the group of women that are bringing this new idea of what it is to be a woman without a child. So we are chosen to really show that to other women and other men and children and everyone what it looks like. So it's not an easy task, but at the same time, it's a sacred path.
It really is, and really about encouraging tolerance and more compassion for every woman and every woman's life experience, which is so varied.
Yes.
And so, with that experience that you had with that soul, and she said, I will leave within 3 days, but I might need some help. What was the process that you then went through over the next 3 days as you went through that soul contract, really?
Yeah, so the meditation happened on the first night, and then the second night, there was a man named Richard Bartlett visiting San Francisco. He has created a system called matrix energetics, really bringing the metaphysics into our everyday lives and creating these kind of miracles and teaching people tools how to do that. And I had never met him in person, but I had this deep instinct as soon as I heard he's in town, because he only comes here really once or twice a year, that I need to see this man. And so me and my husband, we drove down to South San Francisco in this hotel. It was Friday night. We got stuck in the traffic for 2 hours. We barely made it there, right in the end of the whole event. I walk into the big ballroom and I will never forget this. It was a few days before Halloween. So he was dressed up in this leather, Batman suit with, and he's like he's like a giant just to start with. So there he is dressed up as a Batman with these giant boots on. And so I pull him aside from the stage and I said, I'm gonna need a little help here. And I was almost like not directing this whole thing. I just went where I was listening I need to go to. And so there he is in front of me. And I said, yeah, I have this baby here who wants to go and who I can have. And he knew right away without me telling any details, what was going on me personally. And he also asked me to know that he is absolutely not doing anything. He is just holding space for something that is already occurring. And so he asked me to close my eyes. And, I started to get, emotional and tears. But I also noticed that my body started shake because the vibration of my body was going high so that we can really hold space for this event. So there I am standing in front of him, holding my eyes closed. And he goes, you're still holding on to her in your heart. Just let go. And as soon as I let go the cord from my heart to the baby, I saw something that I have never seen, which was angels. I saw 2 angels who came down and they took the baby and they walked her away. And by that time, I was shaking so hard that I actually collapsed on the floor and I was sobbing.
And so obviously it sounds like you were really going through a release process.
Yes, big time. It was on all levels. And so that was kind of the really thanking this presence that had visited me a short while. And it all happened, there was nothing, kind of sacred about the scene. I'm in this really ugly hotel room, I'm hall, on the dirty carpet, just sobbing. Real hall, really bright lights, it's like, okay, so this is where it happens, So
that was the second night. And so obviously you felt that kind of emotional and spiritual release, I guess. And so then how did things unfold like over the following 24 hours or so?
Yeah, so then we drove back home that night and I started feeling my lower back started hurting a lot to the point where I almost had a hard time sitting on the car seat. And I knew that that's what was happening, was that the baby started to release herself. And next day was Halloween Eve. And I spent all day home. I did manage to dress myself up as a little white bunny. So when my husband came home that night, we acknowledged that it's the third night and something is definitely happening. And so that night I went to the bathroom and I was pleading a lot, So that's how it ended. And I remember coming out of the bathroom kind of screaming like, oh my God, this is a miracle. And at that moment I realized, no, this is not a miracle. This is what's happening. This is reality. This is what she told me she's going to do. So in that moment, I had to also like reevaluate my understanding what miracle is. Because it always, when somebody says a miracle, it feels like, oh, it's somewhere out there, some people happening, and it's like, no, it happens like in your bathroom.
Yeah. And that, like we were saying, it really is a shift in reality and perspective and your perception of your reality.
Yes, absolutely. You almost pushed outside of your comfort zone together. Mm-hmm.
And so when you had that physical release and you were sort of bleeding then, and so did you go through a grieving process over the following weeks or months, or did you feel very at peace, or what were some of the emotions that came up for you?
Yeah, I like that you asked me about this because, like I said earlier, I was taken by this wave of light, and it's a fine balance to dance between spirit and body and honor both equally, and when the body needs to grieve, we do need to allow that, even though we have just been touched by something larger than ourselves. But in that moment, I remember emotions coming up, like how the grief started to poke its head was more like, first I started to feel like blaming my husband, feeling like I did this for him, all these thoughts and emotions that were like,
blaming.
This is fair. And then something in me just pulled myself back and said, no, you chose this. You created this. So I kind of went back and forth of that. And the grieving for me initially was more about letting go my beliefs and the reality that I was so accustomed to. So the grieving was really about the way I have seen the world and the things that I have believed in that weren't true. And then it wasn't until like a year later after that, that I allowed myself, or maybe I just felt safe for the first time to really let myself grieve. And it happened in this beautiful workshop called Celebration of Woman in Southern California. And that's where my grieving really took form in the form of dance. The ending ritual was, every woman had to dance, inside a circle. And I went through rage and sadness and all the emotions of not fair, and really, really first time got in touch with everything that I had kind of put aside because it was kind of spiritual to do that. And I realized, no, like this is as spiritual as anything. And so I did go, definitely. But and also my grieving was about thinking that I had failed in holding my space in such a way as a woman to attract a man who would want children. Like there was this kind of like not feeling woman enough because I had to let go my child because of a man. And so the self-blame and I had to go through that to come out of it. And of course, seeing that differently now. And I also remember it really shocked my beliefs about men in general. Like when I got pregnant, I had this unconscious expectation that my husband would want to keep the child, even though he had told me very clearly and honesty that that's not his lifetime. And so when my expectation was not fulfilled, I made it mean that the world or God wasn't on my side, because somewhere along the line, I had associated any male figure as a representative of God. So it can get really complicated and at the same time very revealing and interesting once we start really looking face to face our own limitations this way.
Yeah, and so going through that process and really looking at your expectations and that around, your husband and thinking, oh, well, maybe he will change his mind, or do you feel that experience brought the two of you closer together, or did it make you question whether or not you wanted to continue with the marriage at all?
It did bring us together initially. It did bring us close together, and so we can look at a question that the baby spirit had brought up, which was, what are you creating together if you are not creating a child? Because there is this understanding that when you are with another person intimately, you do have a creation. You go create, if it's not a child, what it is. So we did start a business together as a result of that experience, and so it did really bring the focus into our relationship, and we did continue, and we're no longer married, but we are very, very dear friends, and I feel like our marriage was more on the energetic level and more as a commitment to grow as a soul, rather than create in this world, in this physical world. So also I learned a lot about what marriage is and what are the meanings that we give to marriage and how many different dimensions that kind of commitment to another human being has. And I feel really blessed and fortunate that I have been shown this understanding, what it can be.
Very powerful, and again just really highlights, like you say, that when we enter into these relationships and marriages, that it's a really powerful question to ask, well, what are we creating together? What is this experience about for both of us individually and together? And I believe that if more people asked themselves that question, there might be some very different results within their relationship.
I believe too.
It's fascinating, really, when we start to look at those patterns that we create with people and the learnings that we experience. We learn so much about ourselves.
Yes.
And so it sounds as though this experience, it really changed and deepened your perspective on life and being a woman in so many different ways.
Yes, it really did. It's never ending. It's still taking its own forms, and really looking at love as a way that I used love or misused love in the name of manipulating what I want, like and the belief that I had to unlearn was that love is limited. So always listening to him before I listened to me, because I thought if I don't, then I will be left alone. That whole knot of trapped emotions I had to resolve and be with as well.
Yeah, and I love the way that you've perceived this whole experience that you've gone through, and how you've really, it sounds as though it's so many layers to it. If you talk to friends, or if they discuss it, often their experience and their choice around having an abortion, it can still be one of those subjects that there's just so much shame and guilt attached to it, that often it's just not something that's discussed very openly there's still a lot of stigma attached. And I know from, friends that I've spoken to that have made the choice to have that physical abortion, due to their circumstances or whatever was going on for them, that it felt like the right thing for them to do at the time. But even so, it's just something that can still be impacting them years later and can be very difficult to process because it's just such an intense experience. And I guess as women, the whole topic around motherhood and children, it's one of the biggest decisions and choices we may ever consider.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's still struggling or grappling with emotions like guilt or shame that are related to this topic?
Maybe rather than advice, maybe a few points I can offer my reflection. I'm by no means any expert in grief. I don't think anyone really can, but there's definitely, we can support each other by sharing our own story. And maybe starting with, like I said, being present, not rushing out of the pain. We are such a culture of rushing, like what's next? How do I deal with this? How do I get to the next place? A, B, C, D, like all the list of like, okay, now I've done it, next, like that does not work with grief. It is not something that we can rush. I was given this beautiful advice very recently by my acupuncturist when I was challenged by something, and he said something very simple and beautiful. He said, if you can just try not to avoid pain, because if you try to avoid pain, there will be pain anyways.
True. That's right, absolutely.
And I really realized that how I have this habit of really like all the spiritual practices and all these things that we do here in the West. It's like often really it is just to rush away from something that is really occurring. So I think my first reflection or advice would be just do not rush it. And there's really nothing more pure than pure tears. There is nothing more bright than pure tears. Let them come, let them have their time, and really there is no rush, but also there is a due date for grieving. So knowing when it's over is as important as how long and when to grieve. And I think the second piece would be also from grieving, coming to this knowing and sensation of release and letting go. And like here in this part of the world, it's fall, and nature is a wonderful teacher. Looking at the trees, letting go their leaves is such a beautiful metaphor for us humans. To let go anything that no longer is needed.
So true. And just that being still and allowing those feelings to come. I mean, we hear this all the time. We know that that's true, and yet we struggle to give ourselves permission to allow that. And often people can feel like, they're being self-indulgent, but really there's no shortcut. If we don't feel what's there to be felt, it just is stored in the body and waiting. And then often when we witness other people having an experience of grief or loss, it can just trigger all of those old feelings that have not been fully felt and released at a physical body. And so you're so right that it's very important to just allow ourselves to be in that experience, but then of course not stay there forever and move in permanently. because often people can also get stuck there as well.
Yeah, and learning life teaches us, and really doing our absolute best to not build any walls in our body. It's not good for our health. We don't want the emotions to harden us. We want to keep it flowing. Like, now there's all this research about water and how when we think a thought and the water crystal actually changes form and color based on if we have thoughts of love or if we have thoughts of hatred. So if we are 75% of water as humans, that's what happens to us.
Yeah.
If we think of those thoughts, if we don't let them flow, they get hardened in our crystal flake, our body. That's how illnesses are being created. So really having a practice of compassion and self-love, of knowing how to work with all that, what is up. And it's sometimes it is like for myself, it's for years it was easier to stay in that heaviness because it was familiar, it was comfortable. It was easier to be in that doubt and being more like a victim rather than realizing that if I surrender, it does not mean that I'm going to lose something.
No, it's so true. And so through now that you're a few years later now down the track, has that clarified for you? Do you feel that you do want to be a mother and that you will be a mother at some point now, or have you decided that maybe it's not for me? Or are you just seeing what unfolds?
It's great because when I got your email about this interview initially, I I remember reading your email, and of course, part of me was like, oh, this is great, how wonderful that she's reaching out, and I would be honored. And then there is this part of me that when I read what the theme of your calls are for women who have chosen to birth something else than a child, I remember feeling this wave of sadness, and I was like, oh, am I now in this category of women? I remember like thinking, wow, have I chosen that? And then I was like, unclassified woman. Well, finally I found a category for myself that I feel like I fit in. Like all these different thoughts. Like, oh my goodness, I guess I am. And I guess I'm not sure yet. Oh, guess I don't know.
Well, and also you reserve the right not to know, and you also reserve the right to change your mind. And I spoke to, Randy Buckley recently, and she said that because she'd always been very clear that she didn't want children for most of her life. And then when she got to, I think she was 37, 38, she started to feel this voice of, maybe. And so she was quite horrified to feel this change that, I think I want to have a child. So she kept that to herself for a long time. And then when anybody asked her about it, she, said, I reserve the right to change my mind. And I thought it's so true. Often, and this is the whole point, I guess, with being unclassified, it's creating your own definition of purpose and meaning and realizing you can feel one way right now and you can feel completely different in a minute or an hour. And you might be somebody who, so I've had examples where, people have always been very clear they want children, and then they start delving into, well, what's my motivation for that? Why have I always felt like that? Is that really me that wants that? And they can explore that and then realize, actually, I don't think it's for me. And then, vice versa. You have women who always thought that they didn't want to, and then they start feeling very differently. And of course, so many variations on all of that all the time. And I think the point is we can't define ourselves or other women by whether they're mothers or not. But unfortunately, society does do that, and our media often is very focused on that. So of course, it's completely your choice always. And that's what we have to remember. We define what's true for us. Only we can define that at an individual level. And we have to also define what freedom means for us. And these things can look very different from one person to the next to the next. And it's just supporting each other in those differences and in the ways that we're all the same as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very, very true. And I think it was this wonderful reminder how many of us women, we kind of miss the moment when we have already chosen.
Yeah. Because often we're in denial, or not always denial, but sometimes we're just not completely sure because we're not always being totally honest with ourselves. But,
Exactly.
and circumstances can change all the time.
Yes, exactly. And what I really love about and appreciate about my journey is that this question about a child has really served me to get really close to or getting me closer to knowing what my service is here in this life and what my values and needs are, and really looking at what it is that I'm here for, and if a child fits into that, then beautiful, and if it doesn't, then there is plenty of other ways to have a child, as we know. So that's how I have really used this question, because it really is a question, question, and it is more important to be with the questions than sometimes the answers. So
absolutely, and often the question just leads to another question, but not necessarily an answer.
Yes, and sometimes it leads us to that place of neutrality that is so beyond what we ever thought that could be possible. That's where the limitless is.
Yeah, and so obviously having a child is one way that we can express our creative energy, but there are so many more. But often that's the traditional way that we associate with that, bringing creative energy into the physical. So how do you feel you express your creativity?
I have for 10 years expressed it a lot through touch. One of the things that I do is I'm a body worker. I have my hands deep in the body for about 15 hours a week, and that is a creative, holy time for me. And I do feel that deepening that that way of serving has really opened this creative channel in many other ways. One other way is writing. I love movement. There's all these different ways that I enjoy expressing it, and I feel like creativity is that, again, that ability to be fully in the moment, because creativity happens in that exchange. It happens in that human exchange. It could be in a grocery store, starting a conversation with a stranger, ending up soothing somebody's heart with just a look or inside. It's being in that spontaneous, childlike place that is full of those aha moments, and moving away from certain patterns and entering the next ones. It's an alchemy. It's like, that's how I see creativity. It's life itself, and remaining in that open, inviting place for all of it to happen without losing your center. to me, that is creativity.
Yeah, and that, like you say, that expression of life. And so, as we've been discussing, it's not the role of every woman to be a mother in this lifetime in the traditional sense. Even if it's a biological ability, it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing. We've all got different gifts and abilities, and meaning and purpose, that comes in so many different ways for all of us. And so, what are your thoughts for somebody who's coming to terms with the fact, regardless of circumstances, that a child is not going to be a part of their life, and if they're struggling to find meaning and purpose, can you think of any good starting points for somebody that's really seeking that for themselves?
Probably a good idea to connect with some of your childhood passions. Often we know very early on why we came here, and then life somehow makes us forget, or we forget in the midst of life. Often reconnecting with those happy moments when you were 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, when people ask, what do you want to be as a grown-up? Remembering those moments, trying to find that inspiration and that passion and joy. And then it takes some interpretation, obviously, to translate it into adult language. But often it's very surprising how often they are very close. I remember when I was 7 years old, I had just started elementary school, and after every day I walked back home, and downstairs of my apartment building there was a little tiny grocery store, and I knew every single cashier lady there, and so I walked directly there, and I hang out by the cashier maybe for 2-3 hours, and just talking to them. And they asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my immediate answer was, well, I will be a teacher until 2 p.m. and after that I will be a cashier. And one of the things that I now do is I do write about food, and I'm a nutritionist as well. So and a chef. So I'm like, okay, there is such a foundation for what really is our purpose here on this planet, and the real true definition of success is really to discover why you're here and then act accordingly. So yes, I think it would be a good idea to revisit those childhood dreams and not think them as a childish ideas, but really digging a little deeper and connecting with that. And also meditation has been extremely important. I'm a trained intuitive. I have meditated daily since 2006, and that has opened up an entire new world for me to really be able to communicate with my spirit and receive information in every way, symbols, colors, sensations. So cultivating those senses that are not taught in school is a great way to also expand your perspective and your gifts and your service when you know it's not going to be a child. I actually remember 2 years ago this thought dawned on me, and it kind of shocked me. And I remember telling myself, or someone actually, I think I said it loud, I said, wow, for the first time I'm realizing that what if me having a child now would mean that I would be limited in the service that I really want to give.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a shocker. Did not expect that. So yes, encouraging not leaving any stones unturned in this topic for sure.
And so that leads me to, I was just thinking about the program that you've got, the Womb Quest program. Would you like to share a little bit of information about that?
Sure, yes. I created kind of a virtual medicine wheel. It's a modern day medicine wheel that is done all from home. It's a so-called home study course. And it is done on a platform over the 16 weeks, really being with this question of how to move from fear to love. And it's really for women who have lost an unborn child, but it can also be for women who have not had that experience but really want to get closer to their purpose and grieving whatever they are letting go. Maybe it's the old way of being that is being grieved or let go. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child. So it is a journey, like I said, done online called Womb Quest. And each week we really sit with the question of how to bring this creativity and intuitive abilities back into our bodies through our womb, through our expression, through our womanhood, and using different elements to do that. I'm using 5 elements from the Dagara culture from West Africa. We're looking at this topic through the element of fire, the element of water, and earth and mineral and nature. We also look at different archetypes, different goddesses, how they would hold this question of loss and building your foundation for your purpose. And then there is a lot of recorded meditations that I have created, guided meditations. There's a lot of movement and dance, and it's a very eclectic collection of tools that anybody can use. And there is a platform, questions and homework, and you can share or you can do it completely privately. So that's what the Womb Quest is about.
Beautiful. And so what's the best URL to find you and more about this course?
Unfortunately, my name is so long and hard to spell, but I know that you have probably...
I'll include it. I'll include it in the post to make it easier.
Unless people have pens and papers and my spelling goes correctly, but it's my domain name, riikkarajamaki.com and /WQ invitation. So there's going to be a page on my website called Womb Quest, and this home study course is going to be on that page.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your such a life-changing experience, really. And, you know, I'm so grateful to have been able to talk to you about that today. And I know that so many people will, you know, get so much value out of hearing that and you sharing your wisdom. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And I so love that you invited me. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.